This is a Fox News alert. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia has died at age 79. Scalia was nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1986. We understand through reports right now that he was a guest at the Cebolla Creek Ranch, a resort in the Big Bend region south of Marla, where he was found dead. And we are continuing to follow the developments of this story. We're waiting for our chief legal correspondent who covers the Supreme Court on a routine basis, Shannon Bream. We'll be getting a phone report with her momentarily. But again, just to acknowledge what's going on right now, for those of you just tuning in, Justice Antonin Scalia has been found dead at age 79. We're continuing to follow the developments of this breaking story. And Heather, you and I just finished wrapping up our 4 to 5 p.m. newscast for America's News Headquarters, and we were getting word about this, and now the confirmation is in.
Yeah, a tremendous loss, and reportedly, initial reports saying that he died of natural causes. Appointed back in, 1986 by
Yes.
President Ronald Reagan. He was the longest-serving Chief Justice, originally appointed to fill the Associate Justice seat of Justice William Rehnquist, and then he was, of course, elevated to Chief Justice.
Serving so many years, and of course, after his appointment, he went on to become that, in so many ways, the one who was kind of figured, many people figured him to be a lightning rod on the Supreme Court because of some of the ways he ruled on cases or gave his decisions. Described
actually as the intellectual anchor for the originalist and textualist position in the court's conservative wing.
Yeah, let's go to our Supreme Court correspondent right now, Shannon Bream. And Shannon, this news catches us all by surprise about the Justice Scalia passing at the age of 79. What can you tell us about his personality, and what will the court miss from his contributions over the years?
Well, he was a dependable vote for the most conservative wing of the court on nearly everything. I mean, he has been an anchor, as you said, for certain conservative positions, and undoubtedly. He was also one of the most combative, I would say, when people would be before him asking questions. He was very common sense. He would say to them, you know, that can't possibly be right. You can't possibly mean that. I mean, to lawyers who are very seasoned and standing there making their arguments, he asked very tough questions. And he really, you know, it's sort of a very pedestrian way to say it, but he sort of didn't take bull from anybody. I mean, he really pressed hard, questioned hard. He wasn't necessarily deeply influenced by others. He was very much his own man on the court. And he, you know, was probably the most entertaining justice to watch in arguments, because he was always very astute and well-read in, no matter the topic, if it was technology or some arcane part of the law. I mean, he was always completely engaged, always had a lot of questions. And you knew as a lawyer, regardless of where you were on the case, often both sides would get tough questions from him. But he was very much an anchor for the conservative wing of the court. And he's been there for decades. He has shaped this country because of his positions. He's known for very fiery dissent, too. And over the last few years, we saw those growing. When he disagreed with a majority opinion, he never minced words. He was very tough in his dissent. And his vote is one that will be very critical. There are a number of big cases we expect this term on abortion, on executive action, on executive power, on affirmative action. I mean, so many things, including the Voting Rights Act. I mean, his vote will be missed on those cases.
Very significant cases. Shannon, while you're there, just hold on for a moment. We want to read a statement right now from Governor Abbott in Texas on Justice Antonin Scalia. And his statement says, Justice Scalia was a man of God, a patriot, and an unwavering defender of the written Constitution and the rule of law. He was the solid rock who turned away so many attempts to depart from and distort the Constitution. His fierce loyalty to the Constitution set an unmatched example, not just for judges and lawyers, but for all Americans. And he goes on to say, Shannon, we mourn his passing, and we pray that his successor on the Supreme Court will take his place as a champion for the written Constitution and the rule of law. Let me stop right there, because at this point, President Barack Obama, who is the president right now, will likely have to make an appointment, and then that will have to go through a Senate confirmation. And at this point, no one knows who he will choose. Many people have argued against some of his previous picks. But nevertheless, this is another situation that the president will have to deal with. Do you have any idea where he might go to look for someone who has the capability to become a Supreme Court justice and perhaps have the same contributions that Justice Scalia had?
The one thing I can say with certainty is he probably won't pick anyone like Justice Antonin Scalia. I mean, that's just not, that would never, I wouldn't see that lining up with any of his political or legal philosophy. So I think that that's a safe bet. There have been a short list of names that have been circulated recently because we're always speculating as it gets to May and June at the end of the term if anyone is going to retire. The left wing of the court, several of those justices have said, I'm not going anywhere, don't look at me to retire, I'm staying put, I don't care about elections, those kinds of things. We hadn't thought about what would happen, during these last few months of President Obama's administration if somebody from the right side of the court left. And so it's something that's going to, it just shocks everyone and takes everyone off guard. So I think that there are definitely names the president has been considering and thinking about, but whether we thought somebody from the left possibly would leave this year, the discussion has always been it would be an incredible fight in the Senate because the president is going to be closing out his term in the next few months. And if he goes too far to the left, the Senate is, majority Republican, though it's not 60 votes. And the agreement has been that you don't filibuster Supreme Court nominees. But it could be a very ugly fight in the Senate if the president decides to go too far left. We'll have to see.
And Shannon, in terms of a replacement, you were talking about how he stuck to the Constitution, called himself an originalist. This is a quote from him. He said, in reference to the Constitution, it's what the words mean to the people who ratified the bill, or who ratified the Bill of Rights, or who ratified the Constitution. Meaning, basically, he liked to stick to the words that he interpreted the Constitution of the United States as it would have been understood when it was actually adopted.
Yeah, I mean, he was very much in that vein of thought, and he took a lot of heat for it because people on the other end of the political and legal spectrum would say, this country has evolved, things have changed, time has passed, and thought has passed. But he always felt it was very important to remain anchored to what the founders, he believed, intended. And he was unapologetic about that, whether it was the Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, anything else. I mean, he very much was a man who said the words mean what they mean, and you don't run to other countries or other courts or other bodies to figure that out. You look to the original words and try to follow as best you can exactly what they meant. And
he argued that abortion was not constitutional. He argued that the death penalty was constitutional.
Yeah, I mean, he was very consistent in the way that he saw the law. And you got to remember, too, he was a devout Catholic. And so there were times that he very much had to passively divorce his personal beliefs from interpreting the law as he felt he was assigned to interpret it. But you have to know that his views did influence him, and they were so much of who he was. His faith has been such a deep part of his life, always.
Shannon, as long as you're talking about that and speaking of the fact that his faith was such a huge part of his life, can you give us a description of what he was like as a person? So many times we don't really get to know the Supreme Court justices in terms of what they do when they're away from court, what they do as people who, like us, walk around every day, and once we're done with our jobs, where do we go to spend time with our families and even have fun? What kind of man, how would you describe his lifestyle?
He was hilarious.
Okay.
And he was adventurous. And the funny thing is he formed really good friendships with people on the court who he probably wouldn't agree with them philosophically, was oftentimes on the opposite side of a vote from them, but he had deep friendships with them. He and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg enjoyed the opera together and have been very, very close. He is a hunter. He loves the outdoors, and so he and Justice Kagan, he actually had gotten her to start going to the shooting range with him and on hunting trips with him. And you know, to picture those two together doing that, it always gives us a chuckle. But
yeah, there's a chuckle.
He seemed to have very unique friendships with people on the court, but very independent and very much was not ever going to apologize for the way that he decided anything or saw the world. And he was more than willing to have relationships with people who were very different from him on the court. I would venture to say that he and Justice Ginsburg were exceptionally close, and I think as it's going to be difficult for everyone on the court, I think maybe for her most especially.
How did he look at the partisan divide? Because you're talking about the person now, the individual was able to reach across the aisle to deal with people who didn't see life or see things politically as he saw them or even legally as he saw them. But how did he look at, what was his view of America? Did he see view as a place where all races, all people, no matter what their political stripes are, the color of their skin, could get along?
Yeah, I think that he tried very much to stay out of politics. I mean, he saw the court's view as something very divorced from the typical Capitol Hill politics or White House politics. I mean, of course, you are nominated by a president who believes you share his legal philosophy and will be best representative of you. But they will all tell you, the justices, each one, that they don't like to get involved in politics. They don't want to take positions on politics, and they sometimes hate being dragged into cases where they are afraid it will be viewed that they are taking a political position. So I wouldn't say that any of them are party advocates or take sides in that way. They very much see the court's role as something divorced a bit from that, and they see it as a check on the other branches and very independent of those branches.
So, Shannon, what will happen next? What will be the process to begin to replace him?
Well, the court is very much in the middle of a very busy session at this point, so they will continue on with the work that they have with 8 justices. And the president, of course, will have to very quickly put together a list of nominations, get that to the Senate, and see what they can get done. It's a very busy year on so many different levels, politically and at the court, that I think it's going to be difficult because it's obviously very unexpected. But at the same time, the court has work to do. Those justices are all very dedicated to that. I think of Justice Ginsburg, who was on the bench the day after her husband passed away. I mean, these justices know that they have a unique job, that they have an obligation to this country that no other 8 or 9 people have. And so I think they're going to, of course, be grieving the loss of their colleague and friend, but very much under the direction, I think, of Chief Justice John Roberts, who will be a guiding hand through this for them. Will have to continue on with the cases that they're hearing and the work that they're doing. They happen to be in a break right now for another week or two before they're back hearing cases, but they're always working behind the scenes on the cases they've already heard. So it's a very heavy load, and that will have to continue.
And what is up next when they do return in a week or two? What are they facing?
Well, the one very big case that they have the first week they're back is the abortion case out of Texas, where the state of Texas has passed medical standards, requirements such as things that abortion doctors have hospital admitting privileges within 30 miles of their clinics, things that opponents say are leading to or would lead to about 75% of abortion clinics in Texas being closed. So there's obviously strong opposition to that. But at the same time, Texas has felt very much that it has been on the right track. They passed this legislatively. They feel it will pass constitutional muster, but we already know. I mean, I got an email yesterday reminding me about the protesters who plan to be out there that day. That's March 2nd. So it'll be a very busy first week back with a potentially landmark case for these justices to tackle, along with all the others that are on the docket.
And we mentioned that he believed that abortion was unconstitutional, and in reference to that and Texas believing that they have that right, he also believed frequently in state rights versus, federal.
Yeah, and I think back to a case. I believe it was the SB 1070 case, if I'm right. It was the tough immigration laws that Arizona passed when it said, listen, the feds aren't doing the job on immigration, that we're going to have to do it. And there was an epic fight at the court about that, and there was a lot of tough language from him in that decision about the fact that the states sometimes have to step up if they think the feds aren't doing the job. I mean, he very much did understand that states have rights under the 10th Amendment, and that there was a tough overlap a lot of times with federal issues. But yes, very much a believer in states' rights.